Welcome to Talent Freaks with Andy Coon. I'm Andy, a filmmaker and photographer based in the Bay Area of California. This podcast delves into the journeys of creative individuals who inspire curiosity and impact through their work. In this episode, we're revisiting a conversation from 2006 with Deborah Scranton, an American film director renowned for her innovative approach to documentary filmmaking. She made her feature film directorial debut with The War Tapes, a groundbreaking documentary that put cameras in the hands of soldiers during the Iraq War, providing an unfiltered first-person perspective of combat. The film premiered at 2006 Tribeca Film Festival, winning Best Documentary Feature. Now, before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe and rate Talent Freaks on your favorite podcast platform. It helps others discover these inspiring stories. And I'm incredibly grateful. Thank you. Now, let's go back to 2006 and let the younger version of myself, who's geeked out, talking to an award-winning documentary filmmaker, Deborah Scranton. You're going to love this. I got the director of The War Tapes, Deborah Scranton, to join me in a phone call today. What is so special about The War Tapes that it is the first film that is shot exclusively by the troops or by the soldiers that are in Iraq? It's a National Guard unit from New Hampshire. One of the great things about the times we live in now is the use of the internet, and Deborah directed from her home in New Hampshire. And it took a couple of weeks for the film to get back to her, and she sat down with producer Robert May, the producer of Fog of War, and producer-editor Steve James from Hoop Dreams, and they put together one of the most remarkable documentaries that you'll see about the Iraq War. This is not a political documentary. You will not sit here and think about, we need to get these guys out, we need to keep them in, we got to do this for democracy. What you're going to think about are the troops, their families, and the lives they leave behind, and the people that they leave behind, how everyone is stuck in this together. It is a remarkable documentary, and I highly suggest anybody who hasn't seen it to run out and go see it. Thank you, Deborah Scranton, for taking my phone call, and welcome to fcproducer.com.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
It's my pleasure, and thanks again for inviting myself and my brother up to the premiere of The War Tapes at Tribeca Film Festival. That was the premiere, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. It was the world premiere. Mm-hmm.
That was outstanding.
It was an amazing evening, for sure.
What an amazing accomplishment, and what a night for you.
Yeah, there's something about, for the first time, seeing the film in front of an audience that is such a magical experience. The film took 2.5 years to make from start to finish, and we had done some test screenings along the way and whatever, but for it to really, the first day it unspools, it's amazing.
So what were you doing professionally before The War Tapes?
I had made a film prior to this. It was on local public broadcasting stations, local PBS stations, called Stories from Silence, Witness to War, which was about the World War II veterans from my town. I had taken their names off the War Memorial and tracked them down and done sort of an oral history of them. And it was based on that film that my phone rang with the offer to embed as a filmmaker 5 months later, which would become The War Tapes.
Wow, so they tried to embed you in Iraq?
They called me with an offer to embed as a filmmaker with any of the units being sent over from the New Hampshire National Guard. And literally that night, I woke up in the middle of the night with the idea of giving the soldiers the cameras and working with them over the internet to tell the story through their eyes.
That is brilliant on its own. But were you afraid of going over to Iraq? Was that a consideration?
No, literally the time between the phone call and the idea was just several hours. So when I had gotten the phone call from Major Heilshorn, who's the public affairs officer from the New Hampshire National Guard, I was excited and hadn't really processed it. You get a phone call and your mind's going here and there and whatever. And I used to cover a lot of sports, a lot of extreme sports. So I've been to a lot of remote places. Some people would say doing some insane things.
Nice.
So, it's an adrenaline thing. And in some ways, actually, I credit my sports background with giving me the idea, because when I used to cover major sporting events like the Olympics or World Cup skiing or the Tour de France, for instance, I'm very comfortable with a multi-filming camera platform, so of having multiple cameras on a headset. So, in effect, the idea of having different soldiers having cameras filming different facets of the war experience, it's an extrapolation of that earlier sports television work.
Now, how did it go from that concept to, you selecting the soldiers to use for the documentary?
Well, they actually selected themselves. The caveat for the access, once Major Heilshorn and Major General Blair gave the okay to do the film the way I wanted to, which was giving the soldiers the cameras and working with them over the internet, the caveat was, okay, you got the access, you can have your pick of units, but you have to get the soldiers to volunteer. They were not going to assign soldiers.
Right.
Which I thought was just fabulous, because you're always a little worried if they cast it, if someone cast it. And so within 10 days, I picked the unit, which was Charlie Company 3rd of the 172nd. They're a mountain infantry unit. They're the only infantry unit in the state of New Hampshire. And I'm a little bit of a military history buff, so I know, the infantry usually seals the deal, so I definitely wanted them. And they were going to be based at LSA Anaconda in Balad, which is a large base, the second largest base in Iraq, and they have great internet access. So that was why I picked that unit.
That helps.
Yeah, for sure. Because without that permeable relationship of being able to talk with them,
it would have been chaotic.
Well, yeah, and it wasn't what I want. I really wanted to crawl inside the experience to tell the story from the inside out through their eyes. But in order to do that, I needed to be able to talk with them and communicate with them, in a timely manner.
Right.
And so within 2 weeks, I went down to Fort Dix, which is where Charlie Company was doing some training before they deployed. And I hopped out in front of the 180 men, the entire unit. And being infantry, there's no women in the unit. And told them my vision and made them the promise that we would tell the story through their eyes, wherever it took us, no matter what. And 10 soldiers stepped forward to say that, they would work with me. And of those 10, 5 filmed the entire year. And in total, 21 soldiers filmed for the project.
Wow. And I know you only selected 3 for your actual documentary.
Yeah, unfortunately, theatrical films these days, they've got to be 90 minutes to 2 hours, and it was really important to go as deep into the stories as possible to really help you go inside the experience. And we wanted to follow the families left behind as well, a wife, a mother, and a girlfriend. And in the end, we had to go with 3, and it was a very difficult decision.
The 3 that you did choose were so different from each other. Like, they're just their families, the way they're living, their wives, their mothers, their girlfriends. And it was such a smart choice. And it worked really well to show what they were thinking about and how they were going through it.
Yeah, I think, for me, truth doesn't reside in just one main narrative, but rather a multitude of contrasting narratives. And I think that looking at the war tapes, you go and see the war through these soldiers' eyes, and they're different eyes, sometimes deeply contrasting eyes. And I think that while you're there and you go on the voyage with them, you get to hear and see things that just would be impossible.
Now, did any of the soldiers who were filming ever get physically wounded?
No, they didn't. There was one soldier who was hit by an IED, who started filming after he was hit with an IED.
So did you ever think about how you would feel if a soldier ever got killed during filming?
Of course I did. I mean, I get asked quite a bit, what my greatest fear doing this project was, and my greatest fear doing this project was that one of the soldiers wouldn't make it home.
Watching this film and looking at how the soldiers used the cameras, it seemed like they adopted the camera, that they had something to, they got their emotions out on it. They had someone to talk to about what they're going through, and it seemed like it really did help them in the long run. Yeah,
they have commented in different interviews that I've been on with them and done with them that having the camera in a way was a type of journal for them, a way to document what they were going through and to sort of process it.
Now, you said you instant messaged the soldiers in order to direct them. So how did you get that point across, or how did they communicate where they were going to go that day, and how did you communicate how you were going to direct them? Like, what did you need from them in order to shoot for that day?
Yeah, actually, I think it's interesting, the whole director term in documentary, and what does that mean, and what does it stand for. What I was interested in as a director was to get inside the experience and to tell it from the inside out. It wasn't me saying, oh, I know what a war is, I want to show this. I wanted them to show us. So for me, what I tried to do was really to pull the narratives out of them, to elicit the narratives, to let it come through, to learn what it was through their voices, through their eyes. That's what intrigued me. So I mean, some examples of how the internet helped, for instance, in the film, there is a double car bombing, a double V-bed outside the gates of the base at Taji. And Steve Pink had sent me an email, uploaded a photo showing the aftermath, and I saw on one of my IM windows that Mike Moriarty was inside the wiring on base. So I pinged Mike and asked him if he could go do the interviews with Steve Pink's squad, as soon as was possible. To get that, what they call in the military, the hot wash, the immediate impressions. Because I did the follow-up interviews when they were home on leave and after they came home, but memory has such an interesting way of sort of, shaping, or some would say in some ways maybe eroding the experience, and I think it's very valuable. So the interview you see in the film of Steve Pink talking about Taji was what Mike Moriarty did. That's one example. Another one would be, there's a story that Zach Bozzi tells about defying orders when there were orders laid down to not cross a road, to allow people to cross a road. And he defied those orders. And, he had told me about that in an IM conversation when he was just telling me about his day. And I remembered it. And then, when he was home after, and I was interviewing him, I said, Zach, that story has always haunted me. And could you tell me about it?
And then he just opened up.
Yeah, I mean, for me, a lot of it is about relationship, trust, and building intimacy, and
Right.
really getting inside the experience. That's what intrigues me. For me, what do I possibly have to say about war that could be more important than the soldiers themselves who are living it and fighting it?
Well, that's another positive thing about your documentary. You allow the troops to tell the story. You don't have a voiceover narrator telling the audience what to think.
I hate those voice of God narratives.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the most difficult documentary to make. So I guess you just stuck to your guns, but you probably have a system and you knew where these guys were going to be every day. So you knew what was going on.
Yeah, no, we had this whole grid system. It was by platoon, by soldier, by take number. So, tapes on average took 2 weeks to get from Iraq to me in New Hampshire. And I had ideas, obviously. When a major incident happened, I knew if the cameras were rolling, what cameras were rolling, and what was in the pipeline. But it was an overwhelming task, and I have to say, we were very fortunate to have two brilliant editors, Steve James and Leslie Simmer, who worked on the film, as well as, bloggers and a whole team. Because there were 800 hours of film from Iraq,
Wow.
and 200 hours that we filmed stateside.
Now, did you sit down and watch all 800 hours, or did you allow the editors to sort through it?
No, I watched all 800 hours.
Wow. That's impressive.
I don't know how you can do it any other way.
You're absolutely right.
I don't know. I just wouldn't be comfortable.
I just got a few more questions for you, Deborah.
That's fine.
Now, how's the film being received by Gulf War veterans, or all veterans in that matter?
I think you mean by Iraq War veterans, probably.
Yes.
It's some of the most poignant reactions have come from vets, and all different ones. In New York, there was a World War II vet there who came to one of the screenings, who had been with the big red one for the invasion. And, he stood up and his eyes welled up and he said, "War still looks the same."
Wow.
Yeah, very, very powerful, poignant moments. I've had another soldier come up when Mike Moriarty and I were at a screening together, and he came up to Mike and he said, I wanted to thank you, and please thank your wife, for being so open in the film, because when I came home, I had some issues, and I'm going to bring my wife to see the film so that she can see that I wasn't the only guy who was an asshole when I came.
Wow.
And but if you think about that, the profoundness of that and the healing of that, anything that can help start a dialogue, I think is great. I've had a lot of soldiers who have come up and said to me that they hit and killed civilians too, sometimes little children that they were throwing candy to. And they were devastated. They hadn't known how to broach or tell their families that they had had these accidents. They thought they would be judged, or called baby killers.
Right.
But they felt that the way the civilian accident is treated in the film, if their family saw it and saw that it just happens, it's a tragic accident, that then maybe they could talk to their family about it. So I find feedback like that, especially from soldiers, incredibly compelling and wonderful.
Now, did any other soldiers that were in Iraq try to email you their story or try to get their story out to you?
Yeah, I have gotten different soldiers and Marines who have emailed me and telling their stories. And wanting someone to tell their story. And they've been very kind and said, you seem like someone we can trust, so that's why I'm sending you my story. Very heartfelt stories also. And originally when we had started the blog for the War Tapes, there was a hope to try to continue to tell those stories, but the direction of the website has kind of changed, and now it's turned into a more traditional film website.
Could you talk about the relationship of the website to the film? Because it has changed. It started off as a blog.
It started out as a blog, and then there were some decisions. The producers made decisions that they were going to change it. So it was, back to a more traditional website.
So how has this experience changed you?
It's a great question. For me, it's only deepened, my respect and my compassion for soldiers and for their families. I think families are often forgotten in that they serve as well. When
Right.
a family member is deployed, they serve as well. And they've taught me profound lessons in, dignity and patience and try to do the right thing. I mean, for me, I saw through getting to know the guys and going through some of their experiences with them that war can be an incredibly, fucked up scenario. But everything I saw was that a lot of it was people trying to do the best they could in a very difficult.
Yeah. Okay, I have asked my viewers or listeners to ask some questions for you if they had any questions. And I have 3 remaining questions for you, Deborah.
Okay.
All right. This is from Jill Foster. She asks, what compelled you to direct this particular project? Oh, you probably already answered this.
Well, I did, but I can maybe say it more clearly. I think, for me, I've always been fascinated by warrior stories. The Iliad, the Odyssey are 2 of my favorite books. I think it's a story we can all relate to. I think we all go on life's journeys. I think we all, fight battles, and I think we all try to make it home. And I think there's stories we can learn from and honor. So when I got the phone call with the offer to Embed, any filmmaker, the 2 big things you're looking for is access and then funding to be able to make the project.
Yeah.
So when I got the phone call with the offer, and then was lucky enough, to team up with an executive producer who was able to raise the money, we were able to tell the story. So I'm compelled to tell those stories, and also stories of seldom heard voices. The guys in this film are enlisted guys and non-commissioned officers. It's not who you normally hear from. And giving a voice or amplifying the voice of people who you don't often hear from, I'm very passionate.
That's awesome. The next question is from Jared. He asks, have there been any political parties who have tried to use the war tapes as a tool in their campaigns? It's a pretty interesting question.
As a specific tool, I don't know. I go on Technorati and Google the war tapes. I go and try to check it out. Nothing that's been brought to my attention.
Mm-hmm.
I can share one sort of surreal moment for me. I was invited to speak out at a conference in Aspen, and I had Mark McKinnon, who is Bush's media advisor, and Naomi Wolf, who is Gore's media advisor, in the same room screening the war tapes. So, that was a bit bizarre, but good, and they both responded favorably to it. So I think there's when you tell an authentic story, you can't really argue with that story.
True.
You may disagree with it, you may not like it, but you can't really argue with it.
Yeah, and I don't think the movie can actually be used as a political tool because it shows people's story. It doesn't show what's right and what's wrong. Yeah,
no, definitely. And, in interviews, I won't discuss what I think is war. I won't discuss my political views. And it's not that I don't have those views and I don't have those discussions, but I think for me, if it was us hanging out, talking, I'd be happy to have that conversation. But if it's me as the director of the war tape,
right,
I don't want to insert my view into the discussion.
That's smart. All right, Deborah, this is the last question I have. It's from Blake Fawcett. He asks, with the recent documentaries like Michael Moore's Fahrenheit 9/11, it seems more documentary filmmakers are using their films as a platform for their own views rather than presenting its audience with the information and letting them make up their own minds. Is it hard to keep your personal opinions about the subject out of the project when you're making a documentary? Thanks, and keep up the great work, Blake.
Oh, that's nice. Those are great questions. And for me, I think it depends on what story you want to tell. For me, I wanted to tell the soldier story. I did not have an agenda when I set out to make this film. I wanted to learn and then share what I learned. So I think it depends on what you were attempting to do. I didn't set out to make a political film in a sense of having an agenda or to tell an agenda. So for me, it wasn't hard.
Okay.
I think for me, that's what I like. I like the chance. One of the powers of documentary film and film, I guess, in general, is the fact that it's a medium that allows you for an hour and a half or 2 hours to walk that proverbial mile in someone else's shoes.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
And for me, that's what drives me. That's what, I get excited about when I wake up every morning, is to tell compelling stories, to share those stories, and to affect change, of course, because, I believe in the power of empathy. I think once you empathize with someone, you can't turn your back on. And that's what I mean as far as I think this style of filmmaking, of trying to show a multitude of contrasting narratives, I think it's a different kind of prism. I think it's a different kind of movie, and hopefully people are able to go on that journey, and some stuff might make them look at it differently, some might reinforce what they already know, but hopefully at the end of the day, they're richer for the experience.
I know I was. I mean, you opened up my eyes and also my heart to what these guys went through over in Iraq. Not only that, but also how they open up their families, their personal lives, their stories, and to meet them at the premiere and to shake their hands and to tell them that it meant a lot for us as viewers. It was just awesome. Well, I'm sure it meant a lot to a lot of people.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, you're welcome. And something that I learned when I did my documentary, Greensboro's Child, when I started it, I was a student. I didn't really understand what was going on. And as I matured through this process and did more research, I started to figure out what kind of social impact this documentary had on the community in Greensboro and how important it was for this documentary to get out there. It's funny because now I hear people call me a communist because of my view. And other people thank you because this is something that the city never showed or told its citizens.
Right.
So
I know you have to, I'll share with you, like water off a duck's back. I mean, my whole thing is like, I don't really pay too much attention to reviews and the articles because if you believe all the good stuff, then you got to believe the bad stuff.
You're absolutely right about that.
I'm just going to keep one foot in front of the other, slogging away and tell stories. I'm not going to let it. Yeah, and some people can be incredibly hateful.
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah, I know. I've gotten a few of those, too.
Well, you would know firsthand because at the screening at Tribeca, you had a couple of people in the front row who were kicking and screaming throughout the whole film.
Yeah.
But you took it in stride. You didn't ask them to leave. You just let them view it, get their anger, frustration, whatever. But you showed a lot of class by not asking them to leave and just for them to express themselves any way they needed to.
Well, how my mother raised me.
Well, thanks again. You're so accessible, and thank you so much for spending the time and allowing me to interview you.
No, thank you. And I think you're doing an amazing project. I think Greensboro Child was a story. Again, you're giving a voice or amplifying a voice that would not have been heard. So I think it's important that we all keep trying to tell these stories.
Absolutely.
Especially in the days where, media is there's less and less avenues to hear stories. But hopefully the blogosphere is another possibility.
Yeah, and hopefully net neutrality holds firm.
Right. But I will say, I don't believe in subjectivity. I get asked, and I know you asked me something sort of along those lines of I don't believe in subjectivity or objectivity. I don't think it. I think when you decide to tell a story, you embrace that story, and I think that's how you tell a true story. I get asked sometimes, well, how come you didn't tell the Iraqi point of view? And I said, I know a few filmmakers who have done a great job at that. Yeah. I'm happy to recommend their films to you. For me, I wanted to immerse myself in the story of the U.S. soldiers. That was the story I wanted. So I think that's also an important thing to have a dialogue about as far as the whole, is there really such a thing as objectivity? I, for one, don't think there is.
That's a tough line. It really, as far as I see it, I think everything that touches you, because it
affects you. You're
Yeah.
the sum of all of your life's experiences.
Yeah, and you're putting your own decisions into everything that you do with the film.
Right.
You know, I wish I had more time. I could have asked her more questions, more about how she thinks as a director, and that's something I need to start working on some more. So please bring me some feedback on these podcasts. And there's a little backstory to this. My brother Sean Coon, go check out his website, seancoon.org. Deborah and Sean struck up kind of like a blogging friendship. She commented on his posts, he commented on her posts. She really digs his philosophy about transparency and Web 2.0. And that's when Deborah invited Sean to come up to Tribeca for the premiere of the War Tapes. And Sean in turn asked if he could bring his brother. So she, of course, agreed, and that's how I got a chance to get to know Deborah. So I got a great big brother that looks out for me, and thank you so much, Sean, Deborah. You guys are really cool. You are the shit. Okay, you are the shit. Thanks for listening to the episode of Talent Freaks. Deborah Scranton's commitment to innovative storytelling has provided profound insights into the human experience during wartime. Her work continues to bridge the gap between soldiers and civilians, fostering a deeper understanding of the realities of combat. Now, to explore more of Deborah's work, you can watch her TED Talk titled An Iraq War Movie Crowdsourced from Soldiers, where she discusses the making of war tapes and shares clips from the documentary. Also, check out her IMDb page, where she has another documentary listed on there. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and rate the podcast. It truly helps others discover these incredible stories. If you want to know more about me, visit talentfreaks.com to check out some of the video work that I've done, as well as some of the photography that I've been doing for the last few years, which I am absolutely love doing. And if you have suggestions for future guests or topics, feel free to reach out. I'm always eager to bring new and exciting conversations to the podcast. Until next time, keep exploring, keep creating, and stay curious.